Hey everybody, welcome to this Facebook signing. We have a great event here, taking questions from you about my new book, which comes out officially tomorrow, To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. Joining me and really steering the conversation is my good friend, host of Fox News at Night, Shannon Bream. Shannon, thanks for doing this.
Brett, congratulations on your new book. I know it feels like it's months and months of prepping and getting ready and years before that writing. And everybody is so excited to get it. My husband has read a pre-copy and he stopped so many times and said to me, "Did you know XYZ about Ulysses S. Grant?" So he was fascinated by the things he learned during this and all through this book. And I'm sure you did in the process too. So congrats. Tomorrow, the full title for folks, because you want to get out there and order it now: To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. If I can read my writing correctly, I think that's what
That's it.
So tomorrow is the big day. Of course, you can order right now. And with what we're doing right now, you're actually going to be signing copies, not making copies, signing copies. But folks can go get that at Premier, and that's with an E on the end, Premier Collectibles, plural.com/rescue. You go there and you can get a signed copy of the book by Bret. Is your hand tired yet, Bret?
No, not yet. I'm going to get going. But you can also click on the link. I think it's on this site, which on my Facebook and your Facebook. Thank you for letting us take over the Facebook page. And you just click on that link and you can order a book there. And I'm going to sign these books as we talk and answer questions.
Yeah, we've got some questions. And also, so folks know, this has been made into a Fox Nation special, a special that aired on Fox. You can check it out on Fox Nation as well. And you've got historians and all kinds of people who weigh in about the discoveries you've made, the life of Ulysses S. Grant. And I love, there it is. You can see it, the official signed copy. If you want that, again, premiercollectibles.com/rescue. Brett, I thought it was funny that we all know from sitting in school and learning in our history books that Ulysses S. Grant is this amazing person by the time we meet him, but he didn't start out that way. It's not like he came out guns blazing and people thought this is the one to watch. Tell us a little bit about early Ulysses S. Grant.
Yeah, he was not lucky in business or really his life. He was born in Ohio. He eventually moves to Illinois. His dad is in the leather business, the tannery business, which he kind of hates. The smell of it, the whole thing, doesn't like it. He tries his luck at farming, does not work well at all. He becomes a soldier and eventually meets the love of his life, Julia Dent, but gets sent across the country to the Northwest Territory as he's making his way up the ranks, and is tremendously lonely out there, and does what some people do while they're lonely, and that is drink. He gets busted for drinking by his commander, and they say to him, well, you can either face a court-martial or resign. And he says, I'm going to resign. So he leaves the military, which was really the thing that he was good at, and tries his hand at other businesses, which really doesn't work at all. He goes into a tailspin, really, and is selling firewood before the Civil War. And once he gets engaged in the Civil War and he gets recruited, he shows the leadership that the military saw in him at the beginning. I should rewind. When his father is adamant that he go to West Point, the military academy, and Grant does not want to go. And so he eventually relents, and the Ohio congressman, who's a mutual friend, gets him an appointment, and they go to West Point. And as they're signing in, they say, you are Ulysses S. Grant. And he says, no, my name is Hiram Ulysses Grant. And they said, well, we have this appointment for Ulysses S. Grant. And if you want this to get into West Point, that will be your name. And he says, no, can you change it? And they said, no. So from that point on, he became Ulysses S. Grant. And even though the S stands for nothing, zero, there's no name.
Listen, if you're going to take the deal, I guess you got to take it in the name.
Take the deal fully.
Especially after this is not something he wanted to do. And by the way, Bret will never brag on his own books. He has many successful books. And I meet people all the time, Bret, who tell me they're fans of your books and they start naming them and they tell me which ones they like the best. So I'm going to read you a little bit of praise for this book that comes from people who have read the brand new book out tomorrow by Bret. Douglas Brinkley, a well-known historian, he says this about the book: "To rescue the Republic is narrative history at its absolute finest. Bret Baier brilliantly recounts the heroic life of Ulysses S. Grant." Now we know that wasn't really his name. "His dramatic retelling of the election of 1876 is stupendous, a fast-paced, thrilling, and enormously important book." So Bret, after all of your work on it, it's got to feel good that someone like Douglas Brinkley has such praise for it.
Yeah, and it really does. And I have a great team that works together on this that has been the same in each one of the books.
Mhm.
The Eisenhower book, 3 days in January; Reagan, 3 days in Moscow; and FDR, Churchill, and Stalin, 3 days at the brink. And that was the beginning, middle, and end of the Cold War, that kind of trilogy of books. And I really fell in love with that process of
Mhm.
digging into history. I've told you before, Shannon, that I'm not a historian, but I'm kind of a reporter of history. And this equation is digging into the National Archives and finding these nuggets and then making this quilt of a narrative based on all kinds of different factors. Now, in this case, we hear from Grant himself because he wrote his own autobiography that was really eloquent. And his friend Mark Twain said it was one of the best he had ever seen from somebody who was not a professional writer. It was so good that a lot of people thought Twain did it,
Hmm.
but he didn't. And so that gave us a lot of ammo. And then these different stories and different oral histories, if you will, paint the picture. And then we stitch it all together in this process. The first book took 3 years, I guess, because I didn't know what I was doing at all.
It's always harder in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, the next one was about 1.5 years, and that's roughly what the
Mhm.
time frame has been.
I mean, what wonderful praise from somebody like Mark Twain. If he thinks your accounting and your writing is good, that gives you a lot to work with there. And I know you had a lot of interesting documents and accounts to dig through. We've got some questions for you as you
Yeah.
keep signing. And again, there's
Okay.
a link here if you want to get a signed book by Bret, or you can go to Premier with an E on the end, Premier Collectibles. That's what you'll get, .com/rescue, or use the link that you see here. You can get one of these books that Bret is signing now. Okay, we have a question from Clint in Virginia. He says, Bret, I have a BS in history and an MBA. My true love is history. Over the past few years, we've all seen a push to erase history. How do you keep going with the pushback, and how can we get everyone to understand that history not only is our way to correct mistakes from the past, but it's our heritage, and we shouldn't erase it altogether?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it's actually one of the reasons that I've done these books is because I feel like, especially kids in school, have not gotten a lot of history, or at least not the full, complete history of our country. And we could use more kids that have that knowledge. This book begins actually with January 6th because I'm covering the Capitol Hill riot, and I'm finishing the book at the same time. And that moment kind of spurs this thought back to 1876 when there's a contested election and the country's on the brink of civil war. January 6th was not the brink of civil war, but it was really a dark day on Capitol Hill. And so that's how the book starts, to kind of get into Grant. But it ends with this image after the George Floyd killing and the trial, not yet the trial, but in that summertime in San Francisco, the Grant statue is pulled down. And I'm watching that, and a reporter is asking, why are you pulling the Grant statue down? And the person and people doing it say, because he's tied to slavery. And here it's exactly the opposite. Here is a president that really fought his entire life for equality for blacks. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment tied directly to Grant and his efforts. And if anything, he should be credited more for keeping the Union together and keeping our country together in a time when there was a real split. So I think, that whole time of pulling down statues is dangerous. I understand emotions, but when I saw that, I thought, here's a guy that fought exactly the opposite, and you should be lifting him up, not tearing him down.
Right. I mean, he's standing with what you're standing for and the message you're trying to get out today in 2020 or 2021. This was the guy who was fighting with you, fighting for that same thing.
Right.
We do learn so much. And the way that your books are written, they're very fast paced and engaging so that people are learning and they're entertained at the same time. And we all, as you said, could probably learn more about history. Speaking of history, Jay Winnick, who our viewers may know, he is an accredited and acclaimed historian and writer as well. Here's what he says about Bret's book out tomorrow. Bret Baier, the nation's leading reporter of history, has written a veritable tour de force. This remarkable book is history as it should be, magnificently composed, meticulously researched, and brimming with lessons for today's divided political era. Baier has brought to life the riveting but too often forgotten story of how U.S. Grant preserved the Republic at one of its moments of greatest peril. This is not just a tale for our age, but an absorbing tale for the ages. It belongs on the bookshelf of every lover of history. And Bret, getting to that point that you want people to know the history of this country, good and bad.
Yeah. I didn't even pay Jay for that compliment.
It would have been worth it.
Yeah, it would have been worth it. It was a great thing to get that blurb. And I sent the book to those historians. They've read the previous books, and I think they appreciate, because they do it, digging up history and kind of reintroducing it in a way that is readable to especially young people, but really anybody. And I learned a lot. I learned really a ton of surprising nuggets. For example, Grant was supposed to be with Abraham Lincoln at Ford Theater the night he was shot.
Wow, I did not know that.
Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln had invited Grant and his wife, Julia, to the theater. And Grant went to Julia and then remembered that they had to go to New Jersey to be with their kids at this school event. And so they sent their regrets. I should put it as an aside, Julia was not a huge fan of Mary Todd Lincoln for one reason or another, but there was a little dust up there. But they, anyway, sent their regrets. And then they get off the train and news reaches him about the assassination. And he has tremendous guilt about not being there. Not that he was going to get killed too, but he was a target. But guilt that he wasn't there to save Lincoln, and he thought that he could have saved him. And that starts this whole time where Johnson is then inaugurated as president, and all of the progress that Lincoln has made, kind of setting the table for Reconstruction and getting the South to admit that slavery is not a good thing and let's move on, kind of goes backwards under Johnson, who arguably is our most racist president. And there's no two ways to say that in a fair and balanced way. He really was. And Grant's concerned about that. And that sets up this recruitment to get Grant to run.
Okay, let's take another question here. Ryan from Fresno, California, as Bret is signing away, says, being a full-time dad, a husband, and an employee at Fox News, does it ever get tough to write these books? Or is this a hobby of yours that relaxes you like golf?
Well, golf definitely
does golf relax you? Because golf stresses me, but you're really good. So maybe it does relax you.
It does relax me, actually. I played golf in college. I'm progressively worse as the years go on. So I'd like to say that I'm a walking wallet. I just hand out money to my buddies because my handicap's too low. But that does relax me. This relaxes me in a different way. So I write at night. I'm a kind of a night owl. I usually have a glass of wine. I go home after work. I talk to my family. We have dinner. And then I head up to my office. And I do this back and forth with the co-author, who's fantastic, Catherine Whitney. And we have this researcher, Sidney Soderberg, who is a former mayor in Kansas, who I found at the Eisenhower Library. And it's the same team that worked on all of these books. This is the fourth book we've worked together. So it's kind of like a ping pong match. And we go back and forth and we write some things. We see how that works. We piece it together. And I mentioned a quilt earlier, but that's the process. And eventually the quilt is all together and it somehow looks together, and then we tweak it, and then we send it to our editor, Peter Hubbard, who is fantastic at William Morrow, and he gives like very constructive stuff. And then suddenly we get to the end and we look to lead it off and to button it up, and it feels like a really good TV piece in the end. You know, like where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's how I've approached it. So hopefully it's readable for people to enjoy and not be bogged down in history that's very kind of fast moving, to your point.
Mm-hmm. So some more praise as Bret continues to sign copies for you at home. Again, you can click on the link to get a copy of the book signed by Bret, or you can go to Premier Collectibles, and that's Premier with an E, plural, Collectibles, premiercollectibles.com/rescue for the title of the book. I'll read a little bit more praise while he signs. This is from Michael Beschloss, who says, yes, history can help light the way. Bret Baier's absorbing book shows us why Grant was a far more important president than later generations gave him credit for, and how the crises of Civil War, Reconstruction, and the deadlock of 1876 resemble the turbulent period we are living through now. Bret, you mentioned a little bit of how you've pulled in some current events to talk about the beginning and the end of this book. But did it strike you as you were reading through this? Because sometimes people will say like, oh, this is the worst period ever in our country's history. And really, we can look back and see times where we were incredibly divided and injured as a country. Did you feel some parallels?
Well, I think that that's the perfect example. Is it provides perspective of where we've been. I mean, this time you're talking back in 1876 when an election is in doubt. 3 states have said we're not coming to a conclusion on the electors that we send to Washington, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. And so we look back to 2020 and you think about all of the turmoil and the Trump folks that were saying that the election was stolen. And obviously what happened on January 6th was really concerning in an effort to thwart the election. In the big picture, 1876 and the moment could have tilted back to literally a civil war where families are back fighting each other and the North is back fighting the South. Different, but it's still contentious. And what I took from it was what Grant his charge, which was to keep the Union together at all costs, to save the United States at all costs. And it's Grant who then leads with Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, and Samuel Tilden, the Democrat, a grand bargain that solves the problem with South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida, and gets the Republican elected president and a promise that the South would stay in the Union. It causes problems because the Reconstruction ends and the South takes autonomy to do a lot of things that were not good for Blacks across the South. But in the big picture, Grant does a lot of things that change the perspective. And I think that is something that we could look to today. I mean, we could use a little bit of U.S. Grant in our leadership.
Good leadership, some focusing on unity and what unites us rather than what divides us. And if we can emphasize that and find a way forward together across our divisions. Okay, so Bret, some more questions. Tom from New Hampshire asks this: who had the most influence on you when you were growing up?
That's a great question. I think, family-wise, my mom was the driving force. She was very empowering, Pat Baier, who is in Naples, Florida, and kind of propelled me to do all I could do. When it came to journalism, though, I was a Peter Jennings guy. I loved the fact that he was out and about and reporting and anchoring. And on interviewing, I kind of liked my late friend, Tim Russert, who I loved his style of listening. And I sat next to him on a plane once, and we talked, and I said, what's the one thing you take away from all of your interviews that you've done and how you've transitioned about doing them? And he said, the one thing I would tell you is that to listen is the most important part. It's not the list of questions. It's not what you're trying to get out of them. It is to react to what they say, to be able to turn on a dime. And so those are the people that I looked up to in the business and at home.
Mhm. So again, Bret is signing these actual copies that you can get if you'd like to. There's a link there. That's what you'll get from Bret if you want to follow the link, or go to premiercollectibles.com/rescue. The book is out tomorrow. When you get your copy, it will be signed by Bret himself. So as he continues signing, I will read something. Now, this is a questionable person who gave you a blurb on your book, Brian Kilmeade. Sure, he's written a number of bestsellers, historical in nature himself. But anyway, we love Brian. He says, throughout history, great men have stepped forward at just the right moment to save America at its most critical times. Bret Baier brilliantly chronicles how Ulysses S. Grant was that great man multiple times. Bret brings you back to the 1870s in a way I didn't think possible. A must read, with an exclamation point, Bret.
That's awesome.
Must read, period. Must
Yeah,
read,
that's really great of Brian to do.
And he's written a lot of books, historical books too. And some of the questions I will sum up because there are different versions of it, but people want to know how you choose the person you're going to write about.
Yeah, good question. So the 3 days series started with Eisenhower because I felt like President Eisenhower was not somebody we knew about his time as president. Everybody knew General Eisenhower from World War II, but very little, even historical people who know history, had a good sense of the Eisenhower presidency. So I felt like that was a overlooked area, and I pinged it on his farewell address and used that speech to kind of bounce back. Reagan, his final days negotiating with Gorbachev, and a speech he gives at Moscow State University to students about the fall of communism is going to come, to students in Moscow, overlooked in the big scheme of history. And then FDR, Churchill, and Stalin negotiating and determining D-Day at a ceremony, not a ceremony, a get-together, a meeting in a summit, if you will, in Tehran. Overlooked, not talked about in history. So I looked for another of those kind of things, and I think that Grant's presidency is one of those things. It gets really broad brushed, like there's corruption and scandals. I cover all of those in here. Grant was a trusting guy. He was a non-politician, and he had a lot of people around him who took advantage of him to make money. But Grant himself does some amazing things and leadership that I think is overlooked. And obviously, there's a lot that's known and written about him as a general. And I just felt like he was not covered as a president that much. So that's the choice, is something that I think history has kind of not covered a lot of. Now, I've read pretty much every Grant book. I think I maybe missed one, but a lot of them. Chernow, I mean, it's fantastic, really detailed. But as far as the general public knowing about Grant, that's what I thought was where there was a hole to be able to write about.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to give you another question while you're writing now. It starts out a little tough because you've covered a lot of presidents. Kelly from Hendersonville, Tennessee wants to know, who was the greatest president in your lifetime? Now, if that's too Sophie's choice for you, and you don't want to get blamed for picking someone over someone else, she says, or you can say of all time. And why do you feel that way?
Yeah. So, of all time, you have to give the nod to George Washington, who starts the whole thing and steps aside when he needs to step aside. And, you know, I think that's the first president is probably one of the best. But Lincoln, obviously, is a tremendous president. And if you look at presidents and their rankings, it's interesting to see them shift over time by the historians that we talk about, Michael Beschloss, Brinkley, and all these guys get polled about presidential rankings. Grant has actually moved up the most of any other president, moved up 13 spots in recent years. I think in my lifetime, Ronald Reagan is probably the one that comes to mind that made the most transformational change in how we dealt with something and eventually leads to the fall of the Berlin Wall and bring down of communism that falls under George H.W. Bush. And I do think that overlooked as a great president was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who really took the country through a tumultuous time after World War II, the beginning of the Cold War, and has his hand on the till as the nuclear threat is there. So if I was to say lifetime, Washington, Lincoln, more current, Reagan and Eisenhower. But Grant's making a run at it because he had some unique qualities.
It is interesting, as you said, when those yearly surveys go out and the historians and people dive in and dig in and vote, that he continues to move. The further you are away from his presidency and have more perspective over what was accomplished under his presidency and what kind of guy he was, it is interesting to watch that movement after all of this time, more than 100 years later. Okay, so a little bit more praise for the book. This comes from Mark Levin, who knows something about writing a great book. He says, richly detailed and often suspenseful. The parallels with modern times are striking, and the lessons Bret raises are worth serious attention. The future of the Republic isn't a given. We must fight for it in every era. And again, the book is To Rescue the Republic. It is out tomorrow. That's the book. Bret is signing them now. If you would like a signed copy, you can click on the link that's provided there, or you can go to Premier Collectibles, Premier with an E, collectibles.com/rescue. Okay, Bret.
So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
You've done now 2 books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that day, it is a really cool thing to finally get to the day. Like, what was your experience?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is when you get the first copy, the real copies, when they send you a box and it's got the actual copies of the books in it. It's kind of emotional when you open it up because it's sort of like you're giving birth, like all these nights and days.
Well, I don't know how that goes.
Well, I don't either, but all these nights and days and weekends and really crunching in the time wherever you can to write the book. It's really great to see it come to fruition. Like, okay, it's actually here. Like Bret's got those hard copies in his hands. You'll get them tomorrow when they come to you, if you pre-ordered or if you see it in a bookstore and you grab it. It's just a great feeling. And you kind of send it out into the world and you hope it's a positive thing and that people will learn something and be entertained. And hopefully that they'll feel better for having read your book. And I know that they will learn a lot from this one. So we have a question for you.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. We've got so many. Try to get through. Craig, now you mentioned a couple of nuggets. Craig from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina says, during your research, what was the most surprising fact that you discovered?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Lincoln thing. I think the other thing that was pretty amazing was how humble and non-braggadocious, or he was just kind of an ordinary man, Grant was, to the point where he's the most popular general we've ever seen. He's the only 4-star general since George Washington, because Lincoln was just so impressed with how he was running the war effort. So Lincoln calls for him after he gets his 4th star to come to Washington for a meeting. So he brings his son, Fred. Now, Grant was somebody who did not really care about his dress. So he was kind of rumpled and like an old hat and muddy boots. And Lincoln is putting him up at the Willard Hotel, which is the fancy hotel next to the White House. So he walks in with his son and he says, I'm checking in. And the guy at the desk says, we don't have any rooms. We actually have a room that's just a sort of a closet on the top floor. You both could probably fit in it, but that's all that we'll have for you.
No room at the end.
Right. And Grant says, well, that's fine. And he's non-pretentious and he doesn't care. And so he's signing the register, U.S. Grant and son Fred. And the guy looks down at the thing and says, gets his manager, and and suddenly they get escorted to the bridal suite. And they get the best house in the place. But point of the story being that he never was pretentious. Mm-hmm. But people knew and respected him. He was on a steamer to his vacation place in Long Branch, New Jersey, and going across the water, and this woman comes up and she wants her 2 children to go across on the boat, but she can't go with them. Somebody else is meeting them on the other side. And he sees this, and she's frantic trying to figure out how to do this. And he walks up to them and says, "Ma'am, I will escort your two children to the other side." And she's hesitant. And here's this guy in kind of rumpled outfit. And she looks at him, and he says, "Ma'am, I'm General Grant." And she stares at his face and says, "My word, you are," and lets the children go with Grant across
What a
the
great story.
border. But
I love
you know,
that.
those kind of things, like those like humanizing things,
Mhm, mhm.
are kind of the nuggets that I'm talking about.
Yeah. And for him to be so down to earth and to be walking around very, as you said, he's an unpretentious guy in Washington. That's something to give him a lot of credit for, because things have changed in that respect in a lot of ways.
Big time.
So I love that he is, just willing to be of service and to show up and to be who he really is and not put on airs. That's fantastic. So this isn't a question, but it comes in on the question form. But I want to read this for you, Brett, because this comes from Jim in Hollister, California. And as you sign, this is what he says. "Hello, Brett. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for your professionalism and approach to reaching the facts in a crucial time period of our country's history. I've read quite a few books reflecting the life of U.S. Grant, and I'm looking forward to reading To Rescue the Republic. Living
Nice.
just outside of San Francisco and having visited U.S. Grant statue a number of times, I too was saddened when it was removed. Thank you and God bless, James Jude Grant."
Nice. I wonder
I
if there's
don't know
any
if there's a
relation.
I know he doesn't say anything about the relationship there, but he wanted to compliment you on your work, and he is looking forward to reading this book. It's out
Nice.
tomorrow. James Jude Grant, if you'd like to check it out, there it is. Brett is
Thank
signing away. You can click on the link and get a book signed by Brett as he's doing it right now. Or you can go to premiercollectibles.com/rescue. And don't forget, Premier has an E on the end and it's plural, premiercollectibles.com/rescue. So a lot of folks, these people have very good questions. You've hit on a couple of these, but I'll ask you this. Would you
Mhm.
consider yourself an historian, or are you just a history nerd? Or do you answer to either one of those?
Yeah, history
Oh,
nerd is kind of good. I was not a history major in college. I was an English and political science major. And but I kind of wish I took history. I took some history classes, but I wish I majored in history because I fell in love with the history during this process of these books. And I think um, most of all, I've fallen in love with the prospect of introducing these leaders in a different way that maybe somebody is affected. Like maybe somebody takes some nugget of Eisenhower or some nugget of Grant and becomes their own Grant or Eisenhower or Reagan or FDR. And I think our country needs to be looking back at our history to know where we're going to go in our future. I was telling somebody the other day that I, on the other three books, had a young readers edition that was like
mhm.
8 to 14 years old of each of the books. And I gave a speech at the Reagan Library, and I know you've been out there, and great
Beautiful.
crowds. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
gorgeous. And the best thing that ever happened about these history books happened as I was signing books. This eighth grade teacher came up and said, "I want you to know that this next semester, I am doing a 3 days class.
Oh,
We are doing
wow.
your first book, second book, third book in beginning, middle, and end of the Cold War." And that was the moment that I
Mm,
was like, that made everything. And
exactly.
ideally, there'll be a grant class to rescue the Republic, and maybe there's an aspiring grant person out there.
Do you think you'll have a youth version or young readers version of this as well?
So we're in the process of doing something a little different with the young readers, and yes, there will be a version, just not right
Okay.
out at the same time.
Okay. But
Yeah,
eventually folks can look for that.
yeah.
James L. Swanson, his praise of this fabulous book is a brilliant character study of a great American. Bear brings Grant to life in vivid, gripping style. And that's not often what people think about when they think about history books. A
Yeah.
lot of times you've got dates and times, and the way that you learn it in school is a little bit different. If you didn't love history in school, or if you did and you want to know more, all of Brett's books are really entertaining in the process of educating you as well. So the new one out tomorrow, To Rescue the Republic, is a deep dive into Ulysses S. Grant, beyond just the general that you may know him as, but also into his presidential history and seeing him in a different light and learning more about him. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. Let me see who this is from. I don't have a name on this one, but it says, do you see yourself writing a memoir in your future? And now I know that you have written about what your family went through, some very personal things, but a full-fledged memoir of your life, do you see that coming at some point?
I don't know. I'm not
You've
sure.
had a lot of adventures. I mean, we get to do fun things in this job.
Yeah,
We see
yeah,
things
we do.
good and
I think
bad. And
I kind of like looking at other people's lives. I did do the Special Heart book at the beginning. That was
yeah.
actually the first book, which was more cathartic for me
Mhm.
about Paul's journey and heart surgeries and kind of our path as a family to get through it, and did that more for other families who were going through the same thing. And that's still out there too. Special Heart, A Journey of Hope. Um, what is it again? Faith. I forgot the faith. I need to remember faith. Faith,
You wrote the
hope,
book.
courage, and love. Holy cow. Um,
You've written a few books since then, so
yes, yes, yes,
a
yes.
lot
I
to
was
remember.
thinking, was it love, hope, faith? And then thank God my assistant Katie is here. Faith, hope, courage, and love. And so you could look at that, and that is my story from the beginning of family time. But I think the history stuff is more enjoyable for me now,
Mhm.
uh, as opposed to writing about myself. Although I will say that you should do another uplifting sunshine kind of book.
Stand by.
Oh yeah.
Stand by. There may be some news in the coming days.
Oh, stand by for news.
I stand by for news. That's what we call a tease in the business. So
Okay.
we'll have some news for you on that front coming up. By the way, how is Paul? Can we get an update?
Yes, Paul is doing great. He unfortunately is taller than me now,
I know. I
which is
cannot believe
really
your boys
embarrassing.
are so tall.
It's insane. I'm 5'11". He is 6 feet tall. He's
Mhm.
14. He's got a size 13 shoe.
Mhm.
He
And a
plays
nice golf
basketball.
swing.
Yes, he plays golf, loves golf, plays basketball. He's doing great, doing great. The heart stuff is doing great. He had a cardiologist appointment today. He's on track. So hopefully it was our last open heart surgery, um, and we're very blessed with where we are.
Yeah, it's great news.
And
It's great to
Daniel,
see
his
you
brother,
flourishing.
is doing really well, and he does not care about his past. He still argues with him and beats him up, and that's
That's good. Brothers treating each other like real brothers.
right. Yeah.
So you mentioned, had an earlier question where somebody was asking, and by the way, Brett is signing. You can get a copy that's signed by him if you follow the link, or if you go to premiercollectibles.com/rescue. But Brett, you mentioned earlier, somebody had asked how you manage all these things with work and with, trying to have family time and golf and writing and all these things that you do. And really, we've all sort of been off the road in a way that last year I think we did New Hampshire and Iowa, and then everything sort of came to a screeching halt. Are you looking forward to getting back out there? Hopefully in 2022, we can be out on the road like we normally would in a campaign year. But of course, that throws another level of commitment, the travel, into everything else that we do too. Do you miss that?
I do, because I miss talking to people. I think it really you get a sense of where people's heads are outside of the Twitter universe.
Mhm.
It's a different animal. I think actually being in somebody's town and talking to them is really a kind of a good thing to do, especially when you're covering politics, because you get a better sense of things. 2016, I was telling somebody the other day that we went to all these swing states, and I took, I think, 34 Ubers. And at the end of that, I would say to the driver, you know, if you're okay, like, how do you think you're going to vote? Would you tell me? 32 out of 34 said they were voting for Trump
Oh,
in my Uber poll.
yeah,
And so
informal.
I would look at the polls and I'd say, I don't know. It just seems like this is something else that's happening. And I said, why? And they said, well, because both parties suck. That's their words.
We're going to edit it for
And
you.
they're
It's a
gonna,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
more colorful than that.
yeah, right, right, right. And and it's better to kick the table over and try something different. So that gave me a perspective that I didn't have just looking at numbers. And I think that that's really important. Um, the book tour is a little abbreviated because of COVID and concerns at bookstores, and I get it. So we can do more of these and sign things.
There it is,
when you're at
folks.
home. There
If
go.
you want one, click on the link or go to premiercollectibles.com/rescue. You can have your own signed by the author, Bret Baier, book. Bret, too, there was a special done on this, and folks can
Yep.
watch it on Fox Nation. Who will they hear from? What will they learn if they tune in for that?
So it aired last night on Fox News, and really well done. The documentary unit took the book, we reworked it, did a number of interviews. Newt Gingrich is in there, former House Speaker, number of historians talking about Grant's life and the key parts of this book, which deals with Grant and the presidency. And I think it was just really well done, stitched together. And so we did an hour. I did stand-up shots in front of Grant's tomb in New York. By the way, when Grant dies, just to show you how popular a figure he was, 1 million people show up for the casket in New York City. And his pallbearers were 2 generals from the Union side and 2 generals from the Confederate side in their full uniforms. And then in the million crowd streaming on both sides of the street are both Confederate and Union soldiers who show up in their full uniforms from the Civil War to watch this casket go down and eventually get to that tomb. So he was just such a popular figure that that gives you a sense about that. Anyway, the stand-ups were there. The other interesting thing about the book is that when he's writing his autobiography, Grant, he finds out that he has throat cancer and he's dying. And again, he's lost all of his money. He had some poor investments after being president where he lost it all. And in an effort to get money, he starts writing these magazine articles. Well, his friend Mark Twain says, "What are they paying you for those?" And he tells them it's like $500 or something. And Twain goes ballistic because the magazine is making a killing off of Grant's very descriptive writing of these Civil War battles like Shiloh and Vicksburg and others. So Twain says, "Stop that. Let's get to writing a memoir and I will sell that." And so he's in the middle of dying from throat cancer. He's really in pain every day writing, but he knows he has to get the memoir finished so that he can pass on money to Julia, his wife, and his family. He finishes the memoir and dies a few days later. And it was the most well-sold book ever in that time. Eventually, Julia makes some $400,000, which translates to about 14 million off of that book.
And he fought through the pain to get that done. And
To
then
get it
we
done.
have his account, and it's not a $500 magazine article that's not really helping out the family or helping his legacy at that point.
Yeah,
We all need a friend like Mark Twain, I feel like.
exactly. We all need a Mark Twain.
Getting out there and advocating for us and helping us to do better and get things recorded and to do it in style. Again, I want to remind folks, because we're about to close up here, the book is out tomorrow, To Rescue the Republic. And it is going to show up on your doorstep if you've ordered it. But here is your chance to get one for someone who is a huge Bret Baier fan, a huge Grant fan, or just a reader, a favorite reader that you know, or for yourself. You can get one of these signed books. The link, you can follow it here. That's why this live signing is going on. Or you can go to premiercollectibles.com/rescue. And Bret, I know that so much of you putting these books together is often visiting presidential libraries. What is that experience like to have access to very special things and very special places?
Yeah, we as a country have to be really grateful that the National Archive system is as good as it is. And if you take the time to delve in and you go there, they'll give you the access. Sometimes you have to wear gloves because you're going to touch the actual documents of handwriting of all of these people. But it's truly, truly amazing. And you can find our history in some of those documents. I've had the blessing to have a great researcher, as I mentioned, who has kind of like the key to figuring out where that stuff is. But I'm happy to bring it forward in a book like this and in the other books. And Shannon, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
You can let the dog in now.
She actually did run and try to jump up, and I held her down. She ran in here.
It would have been good.
Biscuit Bream did not make an appearance, but she's also very excited and wants to say congratulations tomorrow on your book.
Thank you for doing this. We will see you tonight for Fox News at Night.
See you then.
And thanks again. And again, the book comes out tomorrow, To Rescue the Republic. And really excited about it. I'm going to be on Tucker in just a bit talking about it, and I'll be up in New York tomorrow. I am one lucky guy, I think, tomorrow, which is always fun. Thanks again, Shannon. And we will see you all at the bookstores. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Hey, this is John Acuff, New York Times best-selling author of 7 books and someone who's done a live signing. If you like the one you just watched, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. It's full of amazing authors having great conversations and signing books for viewers just like you. So make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching today.